Okay, we're live.
Okay, welcome to the Virgin Authors Show. We are three friends bonded by our love of writing, struggling to navigate the publishing world. But our friend Jana is traveling and can't be with us tonight, so there's just the two of us and our guest. I'm Lissa Reese, and I'm a Virgin author.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mandy McGuire, and I am a Virgin author, and I am so excited to introduce our guest today. Emma Gray is a novelist, a feature writer, photographer, professional speaker, and accountability coach. She's the author of the YA novels Unrequited, Boy Band Meets Girl, Tilly McGuire, and The Royal Wedding Mess, and the nonfiction title, I Don't Have Time, co-authored with Audrey Thomas, and the parenting memoir, Wits End Before Breakfast, Confessions of a Working Mom, which sounds just wonderful. She wrote her first adult novel, The Last Love Note, in the wake of her husband's death. It's a fictional tribute to their love, an attempt to articulate the magnitude of her loss and the life-affirming commitment to hope. Emma lives just outside Canberra, where her world centers on her two adult daughters, young son, loved stepchildren, and step-grandchildren, writing, photography, and endlessly chasing the Aurora Australis. Welcome, Emma, to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to be here with you both.
We are so excited to chat with you about The Last Love Note. And remind me, what's Pub Day? Is it out yet?
No, it's coming out on the 28th of November in the US. It's here. It's out in Australia. You can probably detect my accent. It's been out in Australia all year. So I'm just so excited to be bringing it to the US later in November.
That's great. I didn't know that. So that's wonderful.
And that's interesting, actually. Why do they stagger the dates that way?
Well, they don't usually, but I fell into Zibby Owen's hands later in the process. So it's just the way that it's fallen this time.
Okay, cool. Well, I told you off screen, I feel like I fell in love with you by reading this book, knowing that you had gone through a personal tragedy. And I just felt like I was hearing your heart in this story. So first, why don't you tell our listeners, what's the book about?
It's a book about a midlife widow, Kate, who is processing the loss of her husband while she's starting to fall for someone else. So it's really two big love stories in one, and it flits between the two as we get to know her love story with her husband and then what happened to him at the same time as her beginning to open her heart to someone else. So it's a very deep story about grief, but it's also a light, funny, romantic comedy. So trying to do all things at once in those two regards.
And you do it beautifully. I mean, it's so heart-wrenching. And at the same time, I'm sitting here alone in the house laughing out loud at some of your lines.
Yeah, me too. It's wonderful. So I have a couple questions about the grief portion kind of the book, because I'm just going to play it by ear. I don't want to take too much time on it, but I don't want to skim over it because you have some words I want to read out of your book that I think are so touching and could really be helpful to other people who are processing grief. So I'm going to read one. You can grieve a breakup too, and grieve someone's absence from your life. But when someone dies, it's soul deep and impossible to grasp, endless absence, not just from you, but from the entire world. You won't run into them by accident in the supermarket. You can't stalk them on social media. Your best friend won't furnish you with gossip about their next steps. There's just nothing forever. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, that's just so powerful to me.
It's, I mean, all of this is something that I wish I hadn't learned from personal experience, but I did. And my husband, Jeff, passed away in 2016. And I remember that the beginning of the loss was all quite busy because you're busy planning a funeral and sort of coordinating your life and trying to bring this family through the initial shock of what's happened. He died suddenly, had a heart attack. But then after a while, it occurs to you that what grief really is just this total lack of this person's existence
Yeah.
ever again. And they keep on not coming back. And I just remember that hitting me at a certain point a few months in. And that really was the hardest part. It was then having to accept it. I mean, there's no other thing that you can do other than finally come to terms with it. And I think that takes the rest of your life in some ways.
Yeah.
Except the complete absence of them forever. They just don't
You
exist
just
anymore.
said they keep on not coming back.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it does. It just whacks you out of the blue sometimes, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. And it can't be changed. I think that's one of the hardest parts.
Mhm.
You know, with a lot of other things that happen in our lives, we have some control, or there is something we can do. But this is one of those things that we just, as much as we want it to be different, we can't do it. We can't make it different. So
Right.
it's a matter of us figuring out how we're going to navigate through ourselves.
Yeah. And just to add on another one there, because you just said, he's never coming back. And there's another quote, you say, he's never coming back, I whisper, finally appreciating what grief really is, the permanent ending of a person, the end of their story, the complete lack of their existence. And like, it was like a punch to my heart. Like it was your language in describing these feelings was so touching for someone who I haven't lost a spouse, right? And I felt like I was right there with you and feeling those feelings in the way that you wrote your lovely sentences.
Yeah.
So thank you for being so vulnerable.
Oh, yeah. It was a very cathartic process, as you'd probably imagine, for me to write. And it's also been, I know since it came out in Australia that I've been contacted by a lot of readers who have been through what I've been through and have said this book has really articulated what they've been feeling but haven't been able to say. And for me, that's one of the main reasons why I wrote it. I wanted to somehow honor my husband, but I wanted to also help people to talk about grief and give them some words that might help them understand.
You say he died in 2016. So when did you actually get the idea to write the story, and how long did it take you to the point where because it must have just drawn you right back into the grief.
Yes. I knew as soon as it happened that I would have to write something to get through it, to understand it. And at first, a lot of what I was writing was just real life articles and pieces, shorter pieces about various aspects of our grief and our loss and about him and what he was like. But and then I thought, well, an article's not long enough. I need more. I need a book. And I thought, well, I could write a sort of memoir of grief, but then that involved other people, other family members, and I'm very open online about my life, but a lot of other family members are a bit more private with it. And so I didn't want to tread on toes that way. And I thought I could write a self-help book about grief, but then there are so many that already exist that I thought were fantastic. I didn't really need to reinvent the wheel in that way. So I settled on fiction, and that meant that I could really pour my own genuine emotions into a story, but it was one step removed, and it was somebody else's life. So I had the potential to, it was quite liberating really to choose that approach. And I guess I started writing this book in the US. I was over in New York after a conference I'd been flown over for, which was in honor of my husband, who was a military historian. And I thought I was in New York, and I thought, this is a city that understands grief, that has been through so much, and yet look at it, it's vibrant, it's dazzling, it has a future. And I remember walking in Central Park and thinking, maybe I have a future too. And so I felt called to go and start writing something, even just symbolically at that point. So I went to the New York Public Library and into the reading room, and I just wrote a few paragraphs there. But then it still took me a while after I got back to really feel my way into the story itself. And then it took, so it was probably by then about 2 or 3 years after he died that I properly started, and it took another 3 years after that.
Yeah.
Not
Okay.
surprised.
Yeah. So just one more thing on the grief side of it then. Fiction is just a wonderful way to tell that story without having a self-help book or another book on grief, which so many women could read this, or literally anyone could read this, and you've done it so well, they can help process their own grief by, living through vicariously through your character here, who is just this wonderful hot mess of a character that I just loved. But you also say, there's just two more things. It's you don't recover from this. There's not a healed moment. It just absorbs into your life. And you say, this character says, I've worked so hard. I read literature. I went to support groups. I had counseling. She's doing all the things and she still didn't feel good yet. She didn't feel healed yet. Do you have advice for people who they've done all the things too, and they just don't feel good yet?
Yeah, I think one of the things we need to let go of is the idea that there's any one right way to grieve, and that there are particular stages and they go in a certain order and all of that. I don't think that's necessarily helpful, because everybody has a different experience, and every grief that each of us suffers is different. I lost my mum 3 months ago as well, and that has been an entirely different experience for me from losing my husband. And so I, just because I'm an expert now in the loss of my husband doesn't mean I'm an expert in the loss of my mum. And so we need so one thing that we need to do is just be very gentle with ourselves and the expectations that we have. Also, I think to listen to your own instinct, and sometimes it goes against what you think you should be doing in grief. For example, the year after Jeff died, I found myself putting on a high school musical based on my first teenage novel, which is the last thing you would think that a grieving person would do, but the best thing I ever did. And that experience saved me that year. It was joyous. There was glitter cannons and disco balls and exuberant teenagers, and it was an escape into a healthy sort of little world that I needed at that point. So not to have any preconceived ideas of what you should be doing when you're grieving, and just to, if you can sort of grasp hold of any little piece of light in your life, I say go for it, because things are hard enough as it is. It's not going to fix what you're going through, but it's going to help in some little way.
Thank you. This is like,
I'm like,
heartbreaking.
Devastating. So this story does involve all this terribly sad stuff, and it's also a love story, and it's a love story on several different levels, and without giving too much away, but there is a character in here who we all fall in love with as much as we fall in love with Kate, and that's Hugh. And will you tell us a little bit about Hugh, and if he's because he's too good to be true. I'm sorry. So is he a compilation of people? Is he who saved you? I mean, who is Hugh?
Well, I'm hoping he's a man from my future, really.
Oh, yes.
He is a man who has been her friend the whole way through, who has known her and her husband. He's not based on somebody who I know, but there are elements of my husband in him, and there are elements of my dad in him, and all the men that I admire, actually. And it's a story where he has a backstory too that we're not aware of, and that she's not aware of, that sort of explains why he is the way he is, and why he's so compassionate and understanding and patient with her. And I think that's I think there's a depth to some people that is hard won, and it comes through difficult experiences. And when you meet someone who's been through something, because they are almost on another level, aren't they? They've been shaped by the experiences they've been through. They've come through the fire, and they're a better person for it. He's one of those people. And I just loved writing his character. I mean, it was everything you want from a sort of dreamy romance. It was all the, all those big rom-com movies we loved, and we'd come out of the theater and we'd be crying, and but we'd sort of feel like we were all loved up. I wanted to create that kind of feeling in the book as well, because I wanted Kate to have that second chance in life, and that second happy ending after her first relationship had ended so sadly.
One reason I think you did it so well was that he was this amazing best friend. Like he was comfort always. Like he was always supportive and helpful and loving and kind, and like always he was a total rock for her. And then there's this love interest, and that things are building, but he's always her friend. And it just, I was all in. I was all in for them, and it just built so nicely because it wasn't traditional. Like it didn't just follow a romantic line. Like it was very authentic and really, really amazing. I swooned over him. You did a great job with him. You did good.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the humor a little bit, because I've said how I've laughed out loud reading this book, but the way you've used the humor is surprising little moments, and the way it applies to our daily lives is a big part of this story, and I think is something that really helps with her healing. And I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit.
A lot of that just came straight out of my own life. In fact, there's an entire opening scene involving a grenade that her little boy walks out with. That all actually happened.
Oh my gosh.
Because my husband was a military historian. So, he had been onto battlefields, and my little 5-year-old wandered out with a grenade, an actual Vietnam era grenade in his hand. So when that happened, I remember thinking, well, that's a great opening for a book one day. And I think
it cannot have been as funny in real life as it was in the book.
Well, no, a lot of it was. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't have the hot neighbor and the lovely boss turn up. But other than that, a lot of it was absolutely how it happened. And
wow.
And so, in fact, when my publisher read that bit, she said, I don't know, this scene about the grenade seems a bit far-fetched. And I said, well, unfortunately, that's just what my life is like. But I think when we're writers, it's important for us to be looking for these moments all the time that happen when things sort of are a bit of a mess and go badly. You could sort of fall in a heap over it, or you could think, well, there's some subject matter for my book. And I just collect moments like that wherever I go. And then the other way to incorporate humor would be through different characters. So the mum, for example, is a funny character in this novel, and just the way she speaks and her turn of phrase is funny. And so you can look for different ways to bring the humor in via other characters that lighten things up for you.
Yeah, I think you have kind of a dry sense of humor as well. And like you'd be talking about something really serious, and then the last sentence would kind of be like a flippant joke. And it's like, you can't take life so serious, even in these serious moments, or else you just fall down.
That's it. I mean, I think there is a lot of light and shade in grief. You go to a funeral, and there's often a lot of laughter in the room afterwards when people are telling stories from that person's life. And humor gets us through an awful lot. And if we can just try to hold on to that sense of humor, I think it's vital for our survival.
Yeah. I loved your main character. Like I said earlier, I called her a hot mess. Yeah. And I feel like she's a hot mess through the whole thing. And I adored her. So how did you make her such this, again, like we're talking about Hugh, like she's such a rich character. Can you talk about her a little bit?
Well, I feel like there's the hot mess part of her is very much sort of drawn from my own experience. Don't have to look too far to find examples of that here. But I think I needed her to be on some sort of journey. So we needed her to, and I didn't want to sort of change her too much at the end of it either. I wanted her to be true to herself and keep the personality that Hugh has been attracted to all along. And so that was important. But she also needed to emerge from what she's going through and from the loss of her husband and to grow in some way. And in a way that mirrors my own life, in that, I mean, here I am talking to you about a book that I've written that I wouldn't have written if Jeff hadn't died. And I, you know, if I could choose between having written this book and having Jeff back, of course I would want him. But we are presented with scenarios in life that we can't control, and then we have a choice about what do we do now. How can we create some sort of meaning out of what's happened and transform our lives? And I wanted her to have had that sort of experience. And there's a choice that she makes near the end where she's really having to toss up between jumping into this new relationship or jumping into something on her own with her son. And I think that's an important stage that she goes through. And I didn't want to make it too easy for her, because I think we do need to sort of find ourselves on our own a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Very well done.
Oh,
I love it. So we only have a little bit more time, and I want to switch directions. For our Zibby Books authors, we do these lightning round questions that are not about your book. They're just about you and as an author, so people can get to know you a little bit and find out more about you. So we're just going to go as quick as we can. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start. Tell us, are you having a book tour, and who's coming with you?
I am. I'm so excited. We're coming to the US. I'm bringing my son, who was 5 when his dad died, but's now 12. So he's perfect age to come over and see some of these states. And my 25-year-old daughter, thankfully, because she can do the driving. So that's coming second half of November into early December.
Right. Okay, so in the absence of your husband, who, and now your mom, I'm so sorry, who is your biggest supporter?
My dad. My dad is amazing. He's 91. He's a member of a choir that is for people with dementia and their carers. And he was there with my mum who had dementia. And I went along to one of their performances, and almost everyone in that choir, all these lovely elderly people, came up and said, "I loved your book." And I realized my dad is is having these people buy my book. And so he's amazing.
That's great.
Nice.
Okay, what is your favorite drink?
Drink.
Hang on, while she's writing, or
well,
when
that's it.
writing?
I mean,
Anytime, just anytime.
Probably coffee. I'll say coffee, but that's not all.
Okay.
Okay, so when they make this into a movie, who do you want to play Kate?
Well, I get so confused on this because she's Australian. So I'm kind of hoping that it's an Australian actor. I feel like Margot Robbie would be amazing, but she seems very well put together when she's in Barbie mode. So she'd have to sort of, become a bit more chaotic.
You do it.
Okay, when you're writing, but just when you have downtime, do you watch comedies, thrillers, reality shows, rom-coms? What do you like?
A little bit of all of those, but I'm currently going through a real phase of watching Korean dramas on Netflix. I can't get enough.
They're very popular in Hawaii. Right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is not your first book, but it is your first adult novel. So did you get to use your existing agent publisher, or did you have to start over with this?
I have a literary agent in Australia. She's actually American originally, but she lives here, and she's been with me for the last 3 books, which has been fantastic. And she has been following Zibby for ages online, and just sort of slid into her Instagram messages, and that's how we are.
Wonderful.
Nicely done.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite author?
I'd have to say the author that got me started was L.M. Montgomery, because I just fell for Anne of Green Gables when I was 14. And so I have to say her.
Nice. Okay.
Okay, so we talked about children, grandchildren, step-grandchildren. How about pets? Do you have any pets?
I do. He's running around the floor here. Frank, the cavoodle.
Caboodle. All right, so wait, what exactly is a caboodle?
Well, it's a cross between a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel and a poodle. You call it something different. We call it cavoodle and you call it cavapoo or something, I think. Is
Yes,
that-
Oh.
yes, I have heard of cavapoos,
Yeah.
but all right. You need to pick him up off the floor if
Oh,
you
yeah.
get a
Well,
chance.
he's
If
racing
he comes by, yeah, let him.
Yeah.
Okay, what about your general writing schedule? When you're writing, what's your typical day look like?
Complete mess. I would say when I call myself a binge writer. So when I'm in real sort of first draft mode, I just write and can't think of anything else. I'm driving, thinking about writing. I'm writing till 2 a.m. But then I might go for a long period where I don't write at all. And then the editing phase is totally different. So it varies. And I think every author needs to find what works best for them.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And all the books on writing written by men tell you to, do it in ways that just don't work for women.
Well, exactly. I mean, a lot of the time you're writing outside a children's sports practice or ballet class or something in the
Yes.
car, just stealing the moments from the nooks and crannies of the day.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, there's another writer, Christy Woodson Harvey. She's on the Friends in Fiction group.
Yeah.
And I think her son might be around 12 or something. And she's often comments that she talks into her phone as she's sitting in the pickup line in the car all the time. And she's like, every day I'm in that car doing the pickup and I'm talking into my phone. And so she writes very quickly because she uses that time.
Yes. Yeah. It's amazing what we can do, isn't it, when we really want to?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think we are out of time. Oh my goodness. It's been lovely to chat with you, Emma. We appreciate you coming on the show, talking about your book. We're so grateful that we got to read it ahead of time and help promote and help let others hear these wonderful words and share your story. Can you tell our listeners like where they can get your book and a little bit about where they can get information on your tour?
Yes, I think if they go to zibbymedia.com, they'll find a link to the last love note there, and that has links to everywhere that you'll be able to find the book. But it's going to be very well supported by the independent booksellers of the US who are just really getting behind it, which is wonderful. And then all the information about the tour will be available there shortly as well.
Yeah, that's
Picturing you
exciting.
driving across the country with your
On the wrong side of the road.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Emma. And to our listeners, you can join the Virgin Authors here on Facebook Live on the third Thursday of every month. And you can find more information on our website at virginauthors.com. Please also watch every month for our Zibby Book collaboration authors like Emma. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.